Welcome to ETM Analytics and Treasury One's weekly market review. I'm joined by Andre Cilliers, the currency strategist at Treasury One. Andre, new week, new recording, but most importantly for South Africans, a completely new political landscape. But before we get into all the election matters, I think it best that we can run through everything else. Last week, obviously, we know out of the US, it was the major data coming out for the PCE core deflator. We saw very steady headline and core inflation at the start of quarter two. There's some disinflationary trends visible in the underlying price pressures, but definitely not enough for the Fed to change its tone and become less cautious anytime soon.
Good morning, Ilse Marie. Yes, if you look at this graph, it simply says more rhetoric speech from the Fed can be expected. Interest rates will remain higher for longer. We are not happy with the path, but we are also happy that it is actually working, but we will remain data dependent. And if necessary, we will have to keep interest rates higher for a longer period. I'm beginning to sound like Mr. Powell because that's what he says every time. And it's not going to change. It's going to be this more of the same, unless we see significant changes, which we're not seeing currently. So, we just have to live with it. I'm still quite happy that by the end of this year, we will see it filtering through, and end of third quarter, beginning of the fourth quarter, we will see an interest rate change in the US, and we will see interest rates coming down. Slowly. Very slowly, but it will start coming down.
Obviously, what will add color to this picture is the upcoming week's string of jobs data, labor market data out of the US, including the non-farm payrolls. We will be looking again for some weakening in the labor data, and this could also affect the Fed's decision on when it will start cutting rates. The thing is, if they wait too long, what could happen? It's like a snowball. Once the unemployment starts climbing, it can spiral very quickly or rise very quickly. And then you kind of want to be ahead of that curve. And the thing which makes it a bit concerning or something to look out for is that in the recent business surveys, you can see that there's more mentions of layoffs are slowly trickling through. And this could add to the snowball effect. So definitely something the Fed will keep in mind.
Definitely. There's only one thing that concerns me a little bit at this point in time is when we're getting ready to stay indoors, and I'm definitely ready to stay indoors here in the Western Cape.
Yeah.
We must remember that the Northern Hemisphere is starting to creep out of the indoor situation and going outdoors and going on holiday and out and about because it's spring and it's summer and so forth. Well, spring is behind them. It's now summer. So there could be a few jobs that gets created in this period. Temporary jobs that it might be, but the tourism industry could create a few jobs. So we could see a short-term upswing in job creation in the US. But then, as you very correctly mentioned, then when that falls away and falls out again, you could be surprised with a very quick and sudden jump in unemployment. So I think something that the Fed would be very cautious of and figures that we have to watch very closely. But we're going to have this with us for another 3 months. The same rhetoric speech, no changes.
Okay, so getting to what we actually want to talk about, and it is the big topic of discussion in South Africa. The election results have been declared by the IEC late yesterday afternoon, despite threats coming in from certain parties that they shouldn't do this. And for the first time since democracy, the ANC has lost its majority. It came in very low expectations leading up to the elections. They came in at 40%, obviously the DA, then MK and EFF. And when we spoke about this and when I started thinking about it, this is a scenario that excites me. because I feel like there was the stalemate between South Africans and the ANC for the past 12 to 16 years, starting from the Zuma regime. And it finally feels like that has been broken, because we've been waiting for space and opportunity for change. And you kind of always hoped, even with Ramaphosa's administration, that would come to the fore. But finally, there's really, I'm not saying it's going to happen, but I'm saying that there is finally space for a spark, for some material change and structural change that we want to see in South Africa's economy. And that excites me. And I know there's still a lot of water that needs to move under the bridge for this to happen. Leading up to the elections, ETM Analytics, we were very vocal, and I know we weren't the only houses that were, but we view an ANC-DA coalition as the strongest possible outcome for this election. And now the door is finally open. It might be a formal coalition, it might be a loose coalition, but however the way is, the door is finally open for a coalition that could really push South Africa forward and hopefully get out of this economic doldrums that we've gotten, quite frankly, a bit used to post the financial crises.
Yes, I'm going to start off by saying the one very positive thing about this election is, if you look at a lot of places in Africa and you look at democracy in Africa, when something like this happens, you don't have acceptance of the results, and the ruling parties normally disputed and so forth. We had a speech by the state president last night, clearly accepting that they're not in the winning position. And that's a win for democracy in South Africa. The other one that surprised me about this election is not how well some of the parties did. It's how bad some of the entrants like Action SA, Bossa, Rise Mzansi, and so forth did. They did exceptionally bad. So I initially thought, if we placed the ANC around the 42, 43%, that an IFP, Action SA, Rise Mzansi type coalition would be enough to pull them through to 50. That doesn't even come close. So now it's either a disastrous situation with the MK and an EFF jumping into bed with the ANC, which I hardly see happening, because the MK clearly says, get rid of Ramaphosa and then we might consider it. And I don't think that's going to happen.
There's no love lost between those parties.
No love lost there. I don't think that's going to happen. But then there's the possibility of a PA and an EFF jumping in bed with the ANC, and that forms just over 50%. But that would be a very, very unstable situation, because I don't think that the PA is a very stable coalition partner. Also, their wish list is, do a mass deportation of foreigners out of South Africa. Now, I don't think that that's one that's going to go down well or accepted by the ANC. So the one that's on the table that looks to be the most stable and the most likable is an ANC-DA situation. So let's hope that that comes through. And I think that is the one that will most probably come through. I think that's in the interest of the future of the ANC. I think that's the one that could create investor-friendly policies that could lead to investment back into the country, job creation, economic growth, etc. So let's hope that one comes through. Whether it's going to be that easy to get it on the table, I doubt that. So maybe they might have to go for a very loose agreement, maybe almost have a government of national unity before, and gives them a little bit more time to iron out all the differences and then put a formal coalition on the table. But we'll see how it comes out. I agree with what Mr. Ramaphosa said. It's a time for old leaders to keep cool heads and think clearly about what the public, the voter, what did they say? What do they want? They voted for change. And change is what we want, and change is what they should give us, and change for the better is what people voted for, not for the worse. So I think they'll keep cool heads. I think that's where we'll be heading. And I think that could work well for markets as such. If we look at the rand, then directly after the election, and even on the day of the election, we had already seen the rand weakening. And I could really see how people are just going to shout out, yes, it's the election, the rand's weakening because of the election. If you look at the graphs of the emerging markets performance, rand versus the emerging markets, it's very clear that it didn't move that much on the election. It was a market tendency for emerging markets to generally weaken over the last couple of days. And goes back to inflation, interest rates, international data. It goes back to that. We've seen a gold price coming down. We've seen commodity prices coming down and so forth. Oil is down, and that's because of low economic growth, low demand, and so forth. So it's international data that actually drove this weakening of the emerging markets, not so much the election. I think if we want to wait for volatility in the elections, let's wait for the another 3-4 days and see what comes out of coalition discussion. That's what will drive volatility on the rand. At the moment, we haven't seen much of that.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think we're at a point where markets are now kind of holding their breath to see where these negotiations are going. We know that the Chief Justice has 2 weeks, 14 days from the declaration of the results to call a sitting to Parliament where the new swearing in of the new MPs will happen. They will get to vote for a speaker. The speaker will open the floor for deputy speaker and president and so forth. So there's still some time, but I think up until that point, the market will stand back to see how things play out from here on end. Like you said, the rand could be very volatile as we wait for things to unfold. The one thing on the elections before we sign off, Andre, that also gave me some relief yesterday is when the DA released their negotiation team. Look, we have Ramaphosa, who's very experienced with CODESA, so we know he's a strong negotiator. And then, if you look at the DA's team, that it's very level-headed men and women that is on that team. So at least we know South Africa's political future is being discussed by adults that won't just throw, their toys from the cart when they don't get what they want. So that's the good thing to hold on to, I think, as well. But it's going to be an interesting time, and hopefully it will spark change for the next 4 years for South Africa.
Let's hope it certainly changes things for us for the better. And let's hold our thumbs that our wild cards there in KwaZulu-Natal does not start an unrest situation and riots.
Thanks, Andre. We'll chat again next week.
Thank you.